Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content.
There has been a lot of discourse about the Cleveland Browns quarterback competition, and most of it centers around the prize being the glorious job of starting day one for the Cleveland Browns. Now, on this channel, I try to talk about the QB competition a little bit differently, right? A little with more nuance, because I don't believe the best result for everybody involved, if they were to show the most in camp, is to get the job and be the man week one. I understand that's what everybody's going to want. That's where everybody's mind naturally defaults to. But when you actually think about it, there are some people who it does not benefit to start week one as much as we would think it would, because we want to see more of them out there. And I'm speaking specifically to the rookies. The Browns opening schedule is a slaughter. I'll get into more of that when I talk about how Joe Flacco. The Browns opening slate is a slaughterhouse of top teams. I think the Browns go and they don't play a single team that was under 500 in the first 6 weeks of the season. I think 5 out of 6 teams were in the playoffs last year, and the one team that wasn't is the Cincinnati Bengals, who we all expect to be in the playoffs this year. 6 projected playoff teams the Browns play in the first 6 weeks of the season. And most of those teams have really good defenses to boot. On top of that, the Browns are learning a new offense. Well, not learning a new offense, but going back to an old offense. Still some changes there. A lot of heavy personnel changes on the offensive side of the ball. All of that means that it's not the best environment for a rookie quarterback to play. What I want to do in this series of videos I'm going to do this week is talk about every quarterback in that quarterback room and talk about how they can win the quarterback competition and what the prize should be for if this quarterback does win the competition, right? And we're going to start with Joe Flacco. Now, Joe Flacco is, to me, the default option, not the planned option, but the one I expect. Here's what I mean by that. I think the Browns want Kenny Pickett to be the starter in week one. Everything suggests that the Browns would be happy if Kenny Pickett were at a place where you could start him week one. Because especially football ops, not Andrew Berry, but Kevin Stefanski in specific, right? The on-the-ground football ops, the coaches. What the coaches and the players are going to want more than anything at the quarterback position is stability. Now, I've talked about in the past how that goal is kind of at odds with what I believe Andrew Berry's goal is going to be, is to see as much diversity at the quarterback position as he can this year, which is I want to see them all play, right? I think that's what Andrew's going to want. I think that's what a lot of fans want. I think if you ask Kevin and gave him true serum, what he wants is one quarterback to start all 17 games more than anything. If you look at the roster, the one guy who gives you a decent shot at that is Kenny Pickett, because he is old enough and experienced enough to where he's not going to be a rookie like Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. He has played 10-plus starts recently, right? Whereas you look at Joe Flacco, he hasn't played more than like 10-plus starts in a very long time in his career. And he's young enough to where you can fully expect him to play 17 games if he plays a high enough quality of football. Also young enough to be able to project some upside to him based on scheme and fit for Kenny Pickett. So all those things are why I think the Browns are hoping and planning that Kenny Pickett shows enough during this quarterback competition to be able to take the job week one without any doubt. But I have my doubts about Kenny Pickett's ability to live up to that plan. And yes, I think the Browns, if things go according to that plan, would start Kenny Pickett. I just personally don't believe that it's going to go accordingly to that plan. Joe is the guy I think plays when that plan with Kenny Pickett that we just described fails for a number of reasons. One, because Kenny Pickett might not be good, right? That's a very strong possibility. I mean, it's not anything that would surprise people. So how can Joe Flacco, which just brings me to the topic of the video, how can Joe Flacco win the quarterback competition? And the truth is, I don't really see a world where Joe Flacco wins the quarterback competition in a way where we're saying to ourselves, we got to start Joe Flacco. I think Joe Flacco wins the quarterback competition like a pro wrestling champion retains his belt in a no disqualification bout, right? Like if you watch pro wrestling, you know the rules are if there's a disqualification or a tie in a championship match, the champion retains. So by default, the champion always wins if nobody else outright wins, right? And Joe Flacco's kind of like the holdover champion. He's the interim starting quarterback for the Cleveland Browns right now. And if nobody else takes the job, he will be the starting quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. If nobody else takes the reins. Now, with Kenny Pickett, it's easy to imagine. If Kenny Pickett is lackluster during camp, we're talking more about Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders than Kenny Pickett, right? That's a clear indicator that Kenny's not really living up to the hopes of the Cleveland Browns coaching staff. Then they're probably going to look at it as a situation where it's like, okay, we just got to cut Kenny out the pack and then play Joe Flacco more. Now, some of you guys might be Joe Flacco fans. It might not be flattered with the idea of me saying that I don't think there's a world where Joe Flacco wins the competition outright. This is not really a commentary on his level of play at this point of his career as much as it's a commentary of his age. And the reason I bring up Joe Flacco's age is he's just not going to practice that much. We've already seen this in mini camps and OTAs. Joe Flacco practices significantly less in team drills, especially, than all the other quarterbacks. Like you'll look at these charts, and these charts are freaking useless that ESPN Cleveland's putting out because they don't tell you yards, don't tell you what teams they were against. It's just meant for engagement bait. But the only useful part of those nonsense charts that they put out are the numbers at the end of them, right? Like how many attempts did each quarterback get? And you'll look at like Joe Flacco would have like 5 attempts, and then Kenny Pickett has 12, and then Shedeur and Dylan got like 15 apiece. And that just tells you kind of what it's going to be like in camp. They got a lot of quarterback reps to split around, and Joe Flacco at the end of the day is a known entity. You don't need to watch Joe Flacco practice to know where Joe Flacco stands in a quarterback competition. He's kind of the de facto bar. Again, that's why I view him as the interim starter for the Cleveland Browns, because if nobody else gets past that level during training camp, or if none of the rookies exceeds that so much that it's undeniable that you have to play them, then Joe Flacco's probably going to start. And I think that's the most likely scenario for the Cleveland Browns. Like this whole quarterback competition, who's going to win it, all this stuff is getting built up into the battle of the century. Like you would think it's freaking Royal Rumble the way that people are talking about it. But the truth is the most likely outcome is horrifically anticlimactic, which is Joe Flacco kind of wins it without trying. Right? Because they're not going to want to throw a rookie out there week one, no matter how good that rookie looks, unless that rookie looks transformatively good, right? If Shedeur looks like Jaden Daniels rookie year, cool. If Dylan Gabriel is blowing them out the water in the same way Russell Wilson was in 2012, then yeah, sure, Dylan will start week one. Shedeur will start week one. But odds are, if these guys just look pretty good or great during camp, they're going to probably hold them until the second half of the season, because that's when it makes the most sense to insert a rookie quarterback if you care anything about their long-term future, right? If the Browns throw any of these rookies out there, and it's not because they're forced to throw one of these rookies out there in the first 6 weeks, I would say it's more of an indicator that they don't know or have a great feeling about him, but they just kind of want to throw him out there and see what happens, right? Like it's just, all right, throw him in the deep end, see if he swims type stuff, right? Like it's not really like, oh man, we got to take care of this quarterback. We think he could be the future. That's not really what'd be going on if these guys play super early. So if you look at this from the Browns' perspective, they don't want to play one of these rookies week one. It's clear as day to me. They don't want to play these rookies. They're definitely not going to play Shedeur Sanders week one, right? Like that, it's obvious to me. I know people are going to be upset about that and say that this is an indicator that the Browns aren't holding a fair competition. But I think that's ultimately what's best for Shedeur is not to play week one, right? And people can be mad about it, but people are mad about a bunch of shit that ultimately ends up being good for them in the long haul, right? So yeah, Shedeur Sanders probably not going to play week one. Dylan Gabriel, I mean, it would have to be amazing for them to throw him. Like, the only reason I would think that they would throw Dylan out there is they might feel more comfortable because he has such a large amount of college experience, right? Not just college experience, but FBS football experience. He has played 5 seasons of FBS football, every year as the starter, tons of snaps. So maybe that makes them a lot more comfortable. He's a little bit older than Shador. So maybe that makes them a lot more comfortable with throwing him out there early. Maybe that's their own biases in play, because I don't really think that should make them throw him out there early. But it seems like they're more comfortable throwing Dylan out there early with the starters week 1 than they are about Shador throwing him early, which to a point makes a little bit of sense, regardless of how you feel about either prospect, right? I am not a Dylan Gabriel guy, right? I had Shador as my number 1 ranked quarterback in the draft class, even above Cam Ward, and I think I'm hoping for the day I get to do the victory lap on that one, but we'll see. I ain't gonna be early on that shit. But I had Shador Sanders ranked higher than Cam and everybody else in the class. I didn't think a quarterback should be taken in the top 10 of this year's class, but I'm much higher on Shador than I am with Dylan Gabriel. But I can understand why you would play Dylan before you would play Shador for a lot of reasons, right? He's just a lot less precious of an asset to throw out there if you got to throw one out there than Shador is, in my opinion, which I want to protect him and not play him early as much as I can avoid it as possible. So you look at that, how the room is lined up. They don't want to play a rookie. So it comes down to Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett. And is Kenny Pickett going to be amazing in camp? Are there any indications that Kenny Pickett's going to look amazing in camp? He barely looks like amazing in OTAs, and that's a area that's a situation that's designed to make quarterbacks look good, right? 7-on-7s. It is literally, you have the advantage if you're a quarterback on 7-on-7s, and still Kenny Pickett kind of just looks like he looks like Kenny Pickett at the end of the day. I don't think he looks spectacular or anything. And not to say that Joe Flacco looks amazing, but, if I had to start a game right now, I'd just take what I know with Joe Flacco versus Kenny Pickett, right? So the idea that he's going to come into camp and show everybody undoubtedly that he's a starter just feels a little far-fetched to me. So, yeah, you just look at that. They don't want to play rookie. Kenny Pickett, he's Kenny Pickett. So odds are he probably doesn't outright win the quarterback competition. And then you're just looking at it, and it's very easy to see where the Browns kind of just look around, and it's like being in a club after the lights come on and they see Joe Flacco standing there like, all right, let's go. Let's go with Joe Flacco, right? I feel like all of this hype for this quarterback competition is ultimately going to end up with that being the result of it. There's going to be a lot of people complaining about it, but it ultimately makes the most sense. I think Joe Flacco starting, in my personal opinion, makes the most sense for the Browns' future plans, because that's the one guy you can definitely start that's definitely not going to take the whole season, right? On one hand, he's the best guy you could play week 1 for your toughest stretch of the season. For those 6 weeks, the best quarterback you could throw at him is early season Joe Flacco. There's no doubt about it, right? The most experienced guy, the guy who's not going to be kind of thrown off by playing these experienced defenses. He's going to be early in the season, so his body's going to be as good as it's going to be. The first 6 weeks of the season, the guy who probably gives you the best chance to win is likely Joe Flacco, right? Not a rookie, not Kenny Pickett. And after that, it's very likely that Joe Flacco's not going to play that much after that, right? Because he's old, because he has a tendency to throw pick sixes once he gets a little fatigued, and he's old. He might get injured, right? There's a higher probability of him getting injured, which means there's going to be a lot of opportunity to play not Kenny Pickett, to play Shador Sanders, to play Dylan Gabriel. So that's kind of how I think it's going to go down. I know people are asking hey, for Joe Flacco to win the quarterback competition, just how bad does Kenny Pickett have to look? I don't think it has to be a scenario where Kenny Pickett looks especially bad. But if Kenny Pickett does not have you saying in training camp and in the preseason, this looks like a completely different guy, then it's probably not going to be Kenny Pickett. I know that the Browns would love it to be Kenny Pickett, right? When you talk to people close to the Cleveland Browns organization, they swear to you, Kenny Pickett's the guy. Well, Joe Flacco's more expendable than Kenny Pickett, right? They swear to you, right, when you talk to them, that that's going to be the case. But just look at the situation, man. They're just hoping that Kenny Pickett is going to look amazing, but He's probably not. He's going to look like Kenny Pickett. And if Kenny Pickett looks like Kenny Pickett, there's no way you look at that and say, hey, man, let's just start Kenny Pickett over Joe Flacco for the first 6 weeks of the season. I find it very far-fetched. Here's another thing to think about, right? Kenny Pickett has practice squad eligibility as far as I understand, and Joe Flacco does not. Now, if I'm wrong on that, somebody can correct me in the comment section, but they have made it since like 2020 that you could put veteran players on the practice squad. Case in point, the Browns put Joe Flacco on the practice squad in 2023 pretty consistently. Same thing with PJ Walker, right? It used to be more locked down, who could be on the practice squad. It's opened up the who could be on the practice squad. So Joe Flacco cannot be practice squad, but Kenny Pickett can. Now, there's a question of if Kenny Pickett would clear waivers in order to get on your practice squad. But I think the most likely starting quarterback lineup would be something like this. Joe Flacco, Shedeur Sanders, Dylan Gabriel, they make the main roster. Well, the main roster, the 53-man roster. And then Kenny Pickett is on the practice squad. But he's not a normal practice squad quarterback, right? Kenny Pickett would be the guy who starts if there was an injury to Joe Flacco in the first 2 months of the season. So, yeah, maybe Dylan Gabriel gets in a couple of quarters if Joe Flacco goes down in the middle of a game. But let's say Joe Flacco gets hurts his elbow or something like that. He's out for the year. You got to put somebody in to start that next week's game. You just activate Kenny Pickett off the practice squad, put Joe Flacco on injured reserve, and then have Kenny Pickett fill in the role for Joe Flacco until it's time that you want to put the rookie in or one of the rookies in for the rest of the year. I think that's truly how it's going to go, right? And even if the Browns cannot retain Kenny Pickett on the practice squad, I think it's likely that they get like a Bailey Zapp or Tyler Huntley or somebody they can put on their practice squad roster that's a experienced backup quarterback in the NFL, and kind of hold them there on that practice squad roster so that if Joe does get hurt in the first couple of weeks of the season and you're still not ready to put a rookie out there, you can start the veteran off the practice squad. That's how I think this is most likely to go down. When I talk about how Kenny Pickett can win the quarterback competition, I think that's more in line with what the Browns want to happen, or at least Kevin Stefanski wants to have happen. This scenario right here, I think this is the most realistic one, if I'm being honest with you. Like, if you ask me, Quincy, what do I think is going to happen? What do I think the quarterback's room is going to look like by the start of training camp? By the start of the season, this is how I think it's going to look. I'm convinced that this is going to be how it's going to look. They're not going to want to start a rookie unless one of those rookies looks, again, transformatively good, right? Like, not just like, oh, man, it's fun. Look at these clips he's generating online. No, like transformative. Like, we all have to go, hey, we got to start him now. Like, not it would be fun. Like, no. He is so much better than Joe Flacco right now. Like, that's how we would have to feel. We have to feel like if we start him, we got one of the best 20 quarterbacks in the NFL, no doubt. Very unlikely a rookie gets to that point, right? Even a rookie taken in the first round doesn't have great odds to get to that point in their first 3 months in the NFL. So probably going to be between Kenny and Joe Flacco for starting week 1. And I just think Joe Flacco wins that job easily because Kenny's just not. I don't think Kenny's that good. I don't think Kenny looks good in a camp setting. I don't think Kenny's going to run the offense the way that they wanted to. I think you're going to get more of what you got with DTR with Kenny Pickett, because what I don't love in the Kevin Stefanski system is when a ultra-conservative quarterback gets in there and decides that all they want to do is dink and dunk, the offense looks like garbage every time it's ever happened. Case Keenum, DTR, like Deshaun Watson in 2024, every time you've gotten one of these ultra-conservative approaches to this offense, it looks terrible. What this offense needs is somebody being willing to rip it a little bit, right? And that sounds like Joe Flacco more. And like, I just think 41-year-old Joe Flacco is probably going to grasp this offense, know how to run it, know how to take his shots a lot better than Kenny Pickett will, because I think he's better than Kenny Pickett. And we'll see what happens. We'll see if the Browns are right about this and I'm wrong about it, and I'd be happy if Kenny Pickett looks like a starter by the end of training camp. But, you know, I personally don't believe that's going to be the case. But y'all let me know what you think is going to be the case with the Browns quarterback competition in the comment section down below. Have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.